Burlington Police Commission will now be called to order. This is Robert Depper, the chair. I will do a roll call and determination of quorum. I will call on each commissioner that I can see online or see here in person. I ask that you indicate that you are here. I'll start online. Commissioner Cox.
Here.
Okay. Commissioner Genorio.
Here.
Commissioner Paul. Here. And Commissioner Finneran.
Here.
Okay, we do appear to have a quorum, so we will go forward. Are there any additions or modifications to the agenda? Hearing none, we will move on to the adoption of minutes. Is there a motion to adopt the previous meeting's minutes?
So moved.
Okay. I will second.
Chair Depper,
Yes, ma'am.
I think that you went too fast. I am sorry. On the agenda, you have listed the executive session, but I believe it's no longer needed unless you had something or the chief had something.
I think that's a fair flag. I had thought about that. We had put the executive session on there with the expectation that we might have some body cam footage tonight, but it appears that we do not. So I don't have a problem with a motion to strike that executive session. I can second that. Is there any opposition to that or any discussion on that? No? All right. All those in favor of striking the executive session tonight, please say aye.
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 Those opposed? Hearing none, move forward. The executive session is stricken. With that having been done, is there a motion to adopt the previous meeting's minutes?
Yes.
Okay, and I'll second that. All those in favor of adopting the previous meeting's minutes, please say aye.
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 Those opposed? Okay, hearing none, that motion passes. Now we'll move on to public comment period. Is there any, do we have anyone from the public to address the commission? Yes, Councilor Grant.
Hi, thank you so much. As we all know, we had an ICE incident in our community on March 11th. It's definitely caused, it's caused a lot of concern would be an understatement. I would like to encourage all of you to review the public comment from last night's city council meeting. I think it's very, very important for the members of the commission to hear the concerns of the public. I think that we need to be ready to have some really hard conversations around what the expectation should be for local law enforcement with regards when they are dealing with ICE. And I know that's going to be very difficult. It would be asking local law enforcement to change the way that things have been done. I think a lot of individuals who spoke last night brought up very valid points about who was local law enforcement there to protect. This would include our own officers in the Burlington Department, the South Burlington Department, and the Vermont State Police. I obviously I can't get into it now, but I think we all need to be thinking about this. We all need to be watching all the video. That there's copious amounts of video of what happened. I know that you've gotten a large number of complaints. I believe it'd be very important to watch all the body cam footage for every officer that was there, whether there was a complaint against that particular officer or not. I think it's important to see how all law enforcement was moving in order to educate us toward a conversation about what could have been handled differently. I know our community feels let down. I've not seen our community feel the way they do since 2020. That's how deeply concerning it is at this time. And I just wanted to mention that. I also just want to bring back the concern about the commission reviewing use of force reports. They have not been reviewed for some time. the commission drop this, and I would like to see a discussion of that at some point. And the last thing I'll say is I am responding to the email concerning scheduling a joint public safety and police commission meeting alongside REIB. Thank you so much. Appreciate it.
Thank you, Councilor Grant. Public comments tonight? No? Hearing none, we'll move on. The next item of business is the Chief's report. I notice we are ahead of time right now, and I believe that Lynn Regan is going to give us an update on the chief search. So if nobody has any objection, I will get us a little out of order here to so that Lynn can have her evening back as soon as possible. So Lynn, if you could feel free to go ahead and give us that update, that'd be great.
Sure, thanks for having me. I have stepped in once Ingrid Jonas, the previous senior advisor on community safety, she initiated the RFP for the search with IACP, and they are now leading the search to find a new police chief for the city of Burlington. I don't know if you have received any updates on the process. So I'll just kind of go through the timeline of where we started and where we are to this point. And hopefully this is not too repetitive for any of you. But we did sign a contract with IACP. They quickly engaged with the community. They came on site. They met with city councilors. They met, of course, with the mayor, different members of the police department, the community, really to get a feel of what everybody was looking for and what they wanted in our next police chief. They also conducted surveys. We had a very good response on the surveys. They went through that data to also assist with their search. We are kind of entering the kind of exciting period. A lot of the legwork has been done at this point. We are now partnering with them to create really the recruitment profile for the next police chief. And so IACP is putting together what they refer to as the candidate profile. And that includes information on, of course, the city of Burlington, provides demographics for the city, does a history look back at the type of crimes that were handled within the city, provides them an organizational chart of the department, kind of a breakdown of the different divisions that we have here, K-9 unit, the assistants out at the Burlington International Airport, and then of course the job description itself. And so we're also compiling different photos that we've gotten from the police department. Really received a great amount of support from them to provide this data. And they compile that, they create the profile, and then they begin their recruitment process. They're already kind of discussing the city of Burlington and knowing that the position is coming available. So when they are out and about, they are talking up this opportunity. And they really have the inside connection on not only current chiefs throughout the country that might be interested in a geographical change, but they're also aware of individuals that are currently holding high positions within a police force somewhere else and ready to take that next step to the chief level. So we are really just finalizing that profile. And once we've been able to do that, that's when their real recruitment will begin. And they do a lot of the upfront screening for us based on that profile that we've helped them create. And so they do a lot of screening of the candidates. So by the time the applicants get in front of, the interview or hiring committee, the mayor herself, these are individuals that are serious candidates. They've done their research on Burlington. They've interacted with IACP and kind of addressed their questions. So by the time they reach us, they're serious candidates. IACP has also kind of highlighted just some concerns that not concerns, but just things that might make a candidate hesitant to take a look at this job. So we are working through that. A couple examples of that. As we know, department heads most of us have a 1-year appointment. That could be a drawback for a candidate. The Northeast in general, they've communicated to us the cost of living is very high. So we have to keep that in mind as we move forward with this search. And, in kind of partnership with that, just taking a look at the annual salary that we have in place. Right now, we do not have kind of a official launch date of the recruitment profile being completed, but once we do that, I'm certainly happy to provide this committee an update once we've begun the recruitment. And happy to try to address any questions if there's are any.
Sure. I believe Councilor Paul has a question. Councilor Paul, or Commissioner Paul?
Okay.
That's okay. Thank you so much. Hey, Lynn, how are you?
Good, Karen.
Good. This is the first that we are seeing this chief search timeline. I don't know.
Okay.
I don't know if it was at all made available before I got on the commission. I've only been here a few months, and perhaps this has been discussed in the past. So thank you. Nevertheless, thank you so much for including that. I guess for me, the question is, we are about 1 year away from needing a permanent chief.
Yes.
And is there a plan? Is it basically the thinking of the administration that the official recruitment and application review would start relatively soon, given the fact that it could take 6 to 8 months, given the fact that someone might be relocating from across the country or have other, maybe currently employed? Is it your intention to start this process relatively soon? And I'm not that familiar with, the mayor's philosophy on how committees would be formed to do this. I know what's happened in the past, but again, it certainly is her purview to do this in whatever way is amenable to her. Will there be a committee that will not just simply be internal, or do you know the answer to that at this point?
I don't know the answer to, the mayor's thoughts as we get closer to that point where a committee is necessary. If we take a look at how she's addressed other department heads, then she has invited external members, of the community to be part of that recruitment process. But just to address the kind of first part of that, absolutely. We are moving as quickly as we can to finalize this candidate profile, and we are very close to doing that. And so to your point, we want to move now because if it takes us a year to find the right candidate, then that'll be the case. But if we can find someone sooner, then we are ready to move and hire that individual. And we have established the ability to, keep Chief Burke on the staff, even if we are able to locate a regular full-time police chief. So recruitment is going to start very soon.
Okay, well, all I would ask is that the commission be kept informed. It sounds like you have done a lot of the, I guess what you would call less active work up until this point in terms of, surveys and talking with people. But once the recruitment gets underway, not to say that we need to be kept informed every single month, but I would hope that we would be informed, and certainly would hope that the commission would play some sort of a role when the time comes to either form a committee or do some of the interviews, if that's at all possible. So Thank you. Thanks very much. Thanks for being here.
Thank you.
Yes, Commissioner Cox?
It's my understanding that it's someplace in our stated roles that we are supposed to be part of this process. And so I was just wondering, I can't remember exactly where that is, but correct me if I'm wrong, but I believe that we're actually obliged to be part of this process. And so I was just wondering if we're being included in meetings or meetings with candidates and so forth. Or correct me if I'm wrong.
Yeah, offhand, I don't know the answer to that direct question. I would say we do have a little bit of time, though, to figure that out, as, you know, it's gonna be a while before we have candidates that are brought here to Vermont. IACP is gonna do that initial screening just based on the requirements that we've outlined, the skills that we're looking for. So they're gonna do that initial screening for us, which will save us time, because as I mentioned, we want the individuals, by the time they get in front of us, these are gonna be top candidates. And it's not about whether they're interested in Burlington, it's that they want Burlington, and then we have to determine who the best fit is for us.
Thank you very much.
You're welcome.
And Ms. Regan, what planning has gone in at all to involving the commission in the search?
I'd have to take a look to see if IACP met with any of the commission members when they were here on site or conducted any Zoom interactions with the commission.
Well, I mean, I personally did meet with them once, but I meant beyond that. Once the candidates are, once they get to what part was that on? The candidate profile brochure drafts prepared and moving on to the official recruitment and application review. What plans are there to involve the commission as a whole in that process?
We can share the profile once it's been finalized and it's ready to go. We are still collecting data to be inserted into that profile. Once it's complete, then I'm sure we can share that out with the commission.
So is there any affirmative planning to involve the commission in that, or is that just y'all are happy to share that with us?
I'm happy to share it with you. The data that is embedded currently into that profile is more data that we've collected directly from the police department. It's more fact-based, and I don't know, with all due respect, I don't know the comments that you would have for that profile, but I'm happy to share a draft. I don't see why. It's certainly not a confidential document. It's going to be shared as we enter recruitment. So I'm happy to share it, but it's not finalized as far as everything's not been embedded yet.
Okay, thank you. Does anybody else have any further questions? Hearing none. Ms. Regan, thank you very much for your time. I appreciate your update.
Okay, thanks for having me.
Thank you. Chief Burke, the next item on the agenda is your report, and so the floor is yours.
Thank you, Chair Depper. I appreciate it. I just want to preface my comments tonight that on my way in this evening, I was able to read from a local media source that the agent that allegedly had made the eyewitness observation of the suspect sought on March 11th in the city of South Burlington apparently made a mistake and has filed some type of document in federal court owing to this mistake or mistaken identity. And it just adds to not only the frustration that we feel as professionals in our ability to rely on law enforcement officers to have the best evidence before seizing a house for purposes of a warrant. But this is going to further compound the erosion of trust in law enforcement in general that the community is experiencing. So I just wanted to just call that out for what it is before I start my remarks on the events that we were involved with on March 11th. So,
thank you.
March 11th, 12:39 p.m., South Burlington Police Department requested mutual aid assistance from the Burlington Police Department. South Burlington PD was managing an ICE operation at 337 Dorset Street and needed assistance in maintaining public safety. ICE had established a perimeter around the residence with the intent of seeking a criminal arrest warrant for a wanted subject. Additionally, members of the public had assembled and were peacefully demonstrating at this time. South Burlington Police Chief Bill Breaux had been working to convince ICE CRO agents to abandon their enforcement activity and leverage other investigative means to safely apprehend the subject they sought. The agents refused to deviate from their plan, which is within their lawful authority. Chief Breaux had assessed that if Vermont law enforcement were to extract themselves from this incident, it would leave potentially a small number of federal agents to face the assembled demonstrators. Given national events, we have seen what federal agents are capable of when left alone with demonstrators who attempt to interfere with their operations. Chief Breaux had specifically requested that BPD respond to support his agency as they awaited the arrival of the Vermont State Police. It's important to highlight that our three agencies have been meeting and discussing how we would contend with an ICE ERO surge since January of this year. This incident was never a question of if, but rather when ICE ERO activity would escalate in Chittenden County. Based on the totality of the circumstances and the reasonable conclusions drawn by Chief Breaux, I authorized the mutual aid response to the City of South Burlington. There's a few relevant department directives that is a bit of table setting for our discussion tonight. The first being Department Directive 20, Mutual Aid. Mutual aid is a voluntary exchange of public safety services and resources between members, in our case, between law enforcement entities which operate in Chittenden County. Mutual aid agreements are used by all emergency services. No single department or community can be staffed or equipped for every major incident on its own, so mutual aid agreements allow communities to pool resources and support one another. The BPD directive specifically states that the department shall make all reasonable attempts to provide the assistance requested as outlined in the Chittenden County Mutual Aid Agreement. Although this directive and the mutual aid agreement itself are quite dated, it is still active policy. BPD relies heavily on mutual aid from UVM, PD, and others to sustain operations in the city of Burlington on a regular basis. Additionally, we rely on mutual aid from the Vermont State Police and others to safely staff all major civic events in the city, which include but are not limited to July 3rd celebration, the City Marathon, and the Marketplace holiday patrols that we saw downtown this year. The next relevant directive is Department Directive 03, Statewide Fair and Impartial Policing Policy. As many now know, the statewide fair and impartial policing policy says that BPD employees will not assist with or implement civil immigration enforcement actions. In South Burlington, the ICE operation had evolved into a criminal investigation in supporting warrant, which brings us to Section 5 of the Fair and Impartial Policing Policy, which focuses on federal criminal law in subsection B. And that section says, although sworn employees of the BPD have authority to enforce federal criminal law, enforcement of federal criminal immigration law is generally not a priority for the BPD. Accordingly, BPD employees should not make warrantless arrests, detain individuals, facilitate the detention of individuals, or otherwise expend resources investigating or enforcing unlawful entry or unlawful re-entry cases unless such actions are necessary to ensure public safety or officer safety, actions that pose an imminent risk of physical injury to a subject, officer, or third party. The other two relevant directives, which will come into play when we talk about the review that's underway, are Department Directive 05, which is the statewide use of force policy, and Department Directive 40, which is external and internal complaints, supervisor reviews, admin reviews, internal investigations, and discipline. So once we got the mutual aid call, I communicated with Deputy Chief Brian Labarge, and this team was assembled to respond to South Burlington. Both deputy chiefs responded, one of which, Deputy Chief Labarge, was assigned to the command post. Deputy Chief Young, who's here with me tonight, was the tactical commander, the commander on the ground with the team. Detective Lieutenant was assigned as the team leader. His detective sergeant was assigned as the assistant team leader. 6 detectives and 1 officer comprised our actual response team. Once the team arrived in South Burlington, they were initially staged in a parking lot across from the City Hall in South Burlington, and this map here on the slide illustrates the location of City Hall, 180 Market Street. That's where South Burlington had established their command post. The parking lot directly across the street is where our team remained. It wasn't until about 4 in the afternoon, 4:09 to be exact, where our team had been moved across the street from Market Street into the parking lot on the University Mall University Mall near the Hannaford Shopping Market. It was at about 4 p.m. that South Burlington police officers on the scene noted an escalation of the demonstrators in terms of demeanor and carrying backpacks, goggles, masks, and other protective gear. Federal agents were in the process of obtaining the criminal warrant and supporting search warrant for 337 Dorset Street. In the afternoon hours and leading up until 5 p.m., it had been made clear to the activists assembled on scene that the federal agents intended to obtain this warrant. On the date of the incident, Chief Bro had shared detailed information with me about ICE working with the United States Attorney's Office to obtain the criminal warrant, despite all of his efforts to end the incident without further enforcement actions by the agents. By virtue of this, I never had a concern that, in fact, the agents were not at district court seeking a valid judicial warrant. Once the warrant was in place, a plan was developed to facilitate the following tasks. First, the federal agents developed and delivered a message to deliver to the demonstrators assembled. The message clearly conveyed that the agents had obtained a criminal warrant for the residents and their intent to execute the warrant. An operational plan was developed to execute the warrant. This plan designated specific roles for each agency involved. The announcement was given to the assembled demonstrators at the residence by the federal agents shortly. I think it was about 5:10 p.m., 5:11 p.m. This slide illustrates at 5:26 p.m., this is when the teams were moved into place. The Burlington Police Department team was assigned to maintain a perimeter on the northeast side of 337 Dorset Street and subsequently arrived at that location at, again, 5:26, 5:27 p.m. The BPD remained physically on Dorset Street near the driveway to the residence as the ICE SWAT team unit breached and entered the home. At approximately 5:50 p.m., federal agents began removing detainees from the residence to the transport vehicles which were staged in the southbound travel lanes of Dorset Street. Demonstrators began to converge on the vehicles to impede the federal agents. BPD personnel moved to the area of the transport vehicles to assist with crowd control. At 6 p.m., the first ICE transport vehicle began to move across the median to leave the area of 337 Dorset Street via northbound travel lanes. There's a grass median in Dorset Street, on Dorset Street at that location. BPD personnel assisted with crowd management to allow the first transport vehicle to leave the area. At 6:20 p.m., the second ICE transport vehicle began to move across the median to leave the scene in a similar fashion. What occurred at this time was that the demonstrators had to actually move to flank that vehicle and create essentially a human barrier to prevent that vehicle from leaving the scene. What compounded the issue was that there were two public safety vehicles also parked in this northbound travel lane, leaving a fairly narrow path for the federal ICE vehicle to leave the area. It was at this point where some number of the demonstrators began to attempt to physically stop the vehicle or stand in front of the vehicle, and not in a way with arms locked at this stage, but literally pushing on the hood of the vehicle. And they were being actively resistant with the BPD officers that were assisting to allow space for that vehicle to leave the scene. This is an area where officers from the BPD used physical force, meaning pushing, to move demonstrators, and there was at least one deployment of OC spray by one of the officers at this stage of the operation. Eventually, the officers' efforts, along with the force of a moving vehicle, allowed that federal vehicle to proceed away from the scene. The BPD team assembled back by the public safety vehicles that I had mentioned previously, and as they were doing so, one of the demonstrators who was highly agitated threw an umbrella at one of our BPD officers on scene. Another BPD officer witnessed this and went to arrest that subject. Once the BPD officer apprehended that suspect, immediately two male subjects began to impede and hinder the arrest of that individual. The remaining BPD officers from the team assisted with the apprehension of all three of these individuals. Additional physical force was used in this space and resulted in the detention of three, two of whom were identified and released from the scene, the third of which was taken into full custody and escorted northbound on Dorset Street to an awaiting BPD cruiser by BPD staff. That subject was transported back to Burlington Police Headquarters, was processed, and released on a citation. At about 6:35 p.m., Chief Bro of the South Burlington Police Department transmitted via radio that Burlington Police, South Burlington Police, and the Vermont State Police could clear from the scene. Shortly thereafter, our team retreated back to their vehicles, which were parked on Dorset Street, and moved back to the collection area across the street from the South Burlington City Hall. The team then progressed to a larger collection point with other law enforcement officers behind the Delta Hotel before returning to Burlington Police Headquarters at approximately 7:43 p.m. The arrest that I just outlined involved three individuals. One individual, age 24, town of residence of South Burlington, Vermont, charge assault on a law enforcement officer. Individual number 2, age 24, town Berlin, Vermont, hindering arrest and resisting arrest. Individual number 3, age 28, South Burlington, Vermont, impeding officer and hindering arrest. Again, all three were issued citations, and those cases have been recently submitted to the Chittenden County State Attorney's Office for their consideration for potential charge. Additionally, we wanted to provide transparency on the amount of equipment that we brought to this scene. So the equipment that the BPD team assembled included acrylic shields. These remained unused, grounded in cruisers. Protective helmets and face shields, largely unused, grounded in cruisers. Some officers of the team utilized their own helmets with ear protection during the operation. Gas masks that remained holstered on the team members' persons during the operation. A drone, which remained unused, grounded in a cruiser. A 40-millimeter launcher, which is a less than lethal munition system, was slung on one team member, not used. Beanbag shotgun, again, another less than lethal munition system, remained unused, grounded in a cruiser. Large canisters of OC spray, one of which was carried by one of the team members, remained unused. And then a medkit backpack, which remained in a cruiser. So again, that's a high-level summary of our involvement in this operation. Where we stand now in the wake of the videos that were released and other things that were witnessed by the public, we have received 121 complaints about our involvement in this operation in South Burlington. We've been working diligently to collect all those complaints, categorize them in ways in which we need to investigate those. I will say in large number, they are focused on use of force and fair and impartial policing policy. Deputy Chief Labarge, as you're familiar with the process, is doing all the intake, serializing those complaints, also transmitting back for those complainants that provided their name and means of contact. the complaints have been received, and we have initiated a supervisory review at this stage. And as this commission is familiar, we've got 3 levels of investigation by directive in the Burlington Police Department. The first being the supervisory review, and then above supervisory review is admin review or internal affairs investigation. Really, the difference is when we need to ask an employee a question that may subject them to potential either policy or rule violation and maybe subsequent discipline, they're afforded, obviously, their guarantee rights. We are still collecting all the information to include officer reports. We have to go through the entirety of the body-worn camera footage at the supervisory review stage, as well as allow time for the standard use of force report approval process to move forward. So all of that work is being done over the last, I guess, 2 weeks now, almost 2 weeks now. So that's where we stand in terms of our review. It is my intent to have this review and really an overarching after-action review of our involvement in this incident completed within 30 days. And then as this commission is familiar, this is the bottom half of that one-page walkthrough of the process, and we intend to work through all of these steps. Because this incident involves complaints related to use of force, the executive order, which was issued in 2021 by Mayor Weinberger, is relevant here. So at this stage, we are withholding our body-worn camera footage due to the active agency review, along with an active FBI criminal investigation, which is focused on any assaults that were perpetrated against law enforcement personnel. There's also another consideration here in terms of State Attorney George in her review of potential criminal charges related to the state arrests that BPD made. So at this stage, any public requests for our body-worn camera footage is being withheld. Members of the public have also filed complaints with the Vermont Criminal Justice Council related to use of force and fair and impartial policing policy violations. So our obligation under those reports will be the final agency investigation will be submitted to the Vermont Criminal Justice Council in accordance with state statute. Let me talk about the executive order. As you're familiar, because this is a use of force with public interest, once our review is done, the mayor will have a full briefing on this incident. We'll discuss with her how we intend to resolve this, receive the mayor's feedback, obviously, and then we will do the similar process as outlined for the police commission following the mayor's opportunity to weigh in. In closing, the Burlington Police Department works very hard to be a self-assessing and self-correcting agency. We have a strong legacy of relationship-based policing, progressive response models, and the use of de-escalation techniques across all levels of encounters with the public. Our review will take time and then go through the additional levels of transparency prescribed in both Department Directive and Executive Order related to use of force complaints from the public. As stated, I anticipate the internal review to be completed in 30 days. There are always lessons learned from a thorough review of an incident, issues related to policy, training, equipment, and employee performance. These steps are critically important to help maintain the trust the community holds in the Burlington Police Department, but I fully acknowledge that this incident has eroded the public's confidence in Vermont's law enforcement. A very frustrating element of this incident, local law enforcement nor local government can stop the enforcement operations of ICE. In closing, this is a moment for leaders to come together. This is not a time for polarization. Burlington will need strong leadership at every level to help heal the harm that was caused by this incident and identify opportunities for growth as we work together toward ensuring public safety for all together. Thank you.
Thank you, Chief Burke. I have a few questions for you, and I appreciate what you said, and I appreciate this is a difficult time, certainly for our community. It's certainly a difficult time for the police department as well. They're certainly part of our community and have a difficult job. But I'll start with the most recent thing first. The body cam footage you indicated was being withheld from the public based on ongoing investigations. Did I understand that correctly?
Yes, Chair Dever.
Okay. Well, this body has requested the body cam footage. Can we get that footage?
So I believe that Attorney McClanahan had transmitted an email to you that outlines where we stand on that issue currently.
Well, I have not seen that email, and I believe we do have the authority to receive it based on our authority under Section 184 of the City Charter and Resolution 709, and in our role both to audit and review how policies are directed. Certainly, DD 40, the fair and impartial policing, has been called into question as to whether or not it was executed properly. That is well within the Commission's mandate from the council to review that and review if officer actions did comply with that. So are we able to get that body cam footage?
So recognizing all that you've outlined, I would like to highlight, though, that there's also a process that the commission has always followed as outlined in department directive, and I think it'd be inappropriate at this stage to deviate from that. And again, Attorney McClanahan has provided a legal opinion from the city attorney's office.
So what further process are we to follow, Chief?
Again, I will refer you to the transmission from the city attorney's office.
Okay, but I don't have that in front of me. Can you summarize it for me?
I have
So,
it in front of me, and I was a little confused by it, I think because of the legalese. So if you do understand it plainly, Chief Burke, I would find that helpful.
I don't think that I am the appropriate city official to try to, walk people through it because, again, I am not an attorney. However, I did have an extensive, very long conversation with Attorney McClanahan this afternoon, and I do believe that we need to really lean in here and rely on process, allow us the time that we need in order to prepare to complete our review and get you the data that you need to answer all of your questions as efficiently as possible.
Okay, so I
Chair
understand.
Deborah, could I jump in?
If I could finish, please, Commissioner Cox. What I understand you to be saying, Chief, is that there is an attorney's opinion from Attorney McClanahan that we received just a few hours ago. Am I understanding that correctly?
That seems like a reasonable assumption.
Okay, that articulates to us the legal reasons why we can't receive this body cam footage, notwithstanding our mandates from the council.
And I believe it's reliance on the directive and the standing practice, the past practice of relying on the directive and the role of the Board of Police Commissioners as outlined in that directive.
Okay, but you don't have any more specifics other than that?
I do not.
Okay, thank you. I have a couple more questions for you, and I am aware that the other commissioners may have questions as well. I'd just like to get through some of the ones that I have right now. Now, when you said that there was a plan at Dorset Street that was developed based on the receiving of a federal warrant, a criminal warrant?
Yes.
Okay, where the various teams would go and what they would do, the various law enforcement officers, what their roles would be?
Yes.
Okay. Did you receive, or did the Burlington Police Department, to your knowledge, receive a copy of the warrant?
No.
Okay. Was there any question by our officers put to the city's attorney's office with regard to the validity of the warrant, the identity of the individuals named, any disparity thereof?
So there was no consultation with the city attorney's office. And again, we were working in a joint command center with the city of South Burlington and the Vermont State Police. Also, federal agents were there. I will say with my conversations with both Deputy Chief Labarge and Chief Bro directly, it was very clear that they were working with the United States Attorney's Office in seeking this warrant, and it's really the federal judge that weighs that evidence and decides whether or not to issue the warrant.
Sure, and I understand that the federal judge makes that decision and directs the federal agents to engage with that warrant. And as you're well familiar with DD 40, there are some exceptions to when Burlington Police is to engage with that as well. Would you agree?
Just to be clear, it's actually Department Directive 03, the Fair and Impartial
03.
Police.
Okay.
Yeah,
Well, thank you.
absolutely. And again, as I highlighted in the presentation, Section 5, we were there in support of South Burlington Police Department that was ensuring public safety, given the context of everything that was going on in that scene
Sure, but as Burlington police officers, correct?
as Burlington police officers.
Okay, but there was no consultation with the Burlington city attorney as to the validity of the warrant, or how y'all might engage, or whether the identities of the people matched the names in the warrant?
Yeah, I'm a little confused by the line of questioning, though, in the sense that the federal agents were doing the investigation. They were the affiants. The judge weighs that evidence. The directive is clear about when a criminal warrant is present. There's no mandate that we somehow investigate the federal agents in the moment to ensure the validity of the warrant. There was, I mean, it's undisputed that the warrant was issued, and I understand that it was issued on flawed grounds. I think that is criticism and grounds for criticism and complaint against those federal agencies. But again, we were operating in good faith as a mutual aid partner with the existence of a criminal warrant and under the public safety exception allowed in the policy to be there on scene.
Sure, I can appreciate that. Now, the line of questioning is coming from the fact that we are here now. We have use of force issues that the public has, brought forth. We've got video on Reddit that is publicly available that, whether what happened was right or wrong certainly paints the Burlington Police Department a difficult light. I think we can all agree on that. And we now have a federal agent that says, oh my gosh, I made a mistake. I didn't know that the person I said was there wasn't there. And so the city is now, we are now as a public, in a very difficult situation where we have had federal action that has caused harm in our community, and our police were involved in that situation. There was a federal warrant that the validity can be questioned, and I find it troubling that we're in that situation and there was no question put to our own city attorneys as to whether or not or how we should be involved. And so that's why I'm asking. I don't know, right? This was you say there was a plan put in place for everyone to get to their certain places. It indicates to me there was time to have some reflection about that. It occurs to me that there was maybe some time to think, why are we doing this? How are we doing this? Is this valid? I understand that there is always an impulse to believe, take them at their word. We are federal agents. We talk to the city. We talk to the attorney, the U.S. attorneys. We got the judge's signature. That's great. But we still, I believe, have an individual obligation, both as a city and as individuals, as officers, to know if what we are doing has the patina of validity. And the 3 people that were detained weren't even on the warrant, as I understand the public reporting of it. And when you're serving a warrant, at a minimum, it should be the people that are on the warrant that get arrested. And so I do wonder and still have questions about, this is gonna happen again, right? ICE is not going away. Their directives are not going away. We have a lot of new Americans in this community. This will happen again. And if we don't have a plan for how to manage it, then we can only blame ourselves when bad things happen. And so that's where this question is coming from. What can we put into place at a minimum to make sure this doesn't happen again? Can we at least call the city attorney's office when we have hours to think about, we are getting a federal warrant, what do we do? So that's where this question is coming from, Chief.
Yeah, no, I understand the line of questioning, and I think there's a lot of layers to criminal law in this regard too. Anytime that a law enforcement agency has a valid warrant and enters a vehicle, a home, a commercial space, they're lawfully present. Those federal agents, even though we know the face of the warrant now is flawed, they had lawful presence. Whatever investigative steps they took, whatever conclusions they made, those are theirs alone in detaining those 3 people. We know that they've been released. I would say that, that is how the criminal legal system works. There is due process. Those folks were afforded appropriate due process by the federal court. In terms of police operations, I've never in my career once consulted with the city attorney's office, and I think they might even be a little puzzled by the question themselves on how to establish the validity of the warrant. I could understand taking pause around our role as it relates to the fair and impartial policing policy. I certainly heard excellent articulation from Chief Bro as to the public safety concerns that he had, which then allowed me to formulate a good faith, reasonable conclusion that our role as a mutual aid partner was necessary in that moment. But, you know, I'd also like to remind folks that it's much easier to make these conclusions and think about what could have been done now that we have so much more information. Am I happy about how any of this turned out? No. Am I very skeptical about the actions of ICE and ERO and really question their competency? I do. To your question about like how do we now move forward, I think, you know, we've heard this last night from not only members of the public but individual city councilors that we need a better plan. I knew that we would hear it again tonight. I agree. It's just and this, I don't offer this as an excuse, but context that's shocking to me. This is the first time in my career where I haven't been able to rely on, you know, some good faith from another law enforcement entity. I know how flawed ERO has been operating across the country. We've had grave concern about what it would look like when that came to roost here. That's why we had been talking with our mutual aid partners about what a response may hold. But we also knew in this instance that they did in fact go and get a criminal warrant from the United States District Court. And they were going to execute that warrant despite the number of resistors that were there, despite if they were outnumbered. And we've seen across the country how they level the playing field when they meet resistance. In that moment, I still maintain that it was the right decision to be there, despite the fact that I know we used force and that degrades our brand, the level of trust that our community holds in us. I believe the outcomes that night would have been much, much different. But am I open and eager to reflect upon this experience and to move forward with a better plan? Yes, I am.
Okay, thank you. And I would move just one more time to Attorney McClanahan's email that I just reviewed, and she appears to conflate section 184 with the complaints review because those are separate. And our review under 184 and Resolution 709 has to do with review of policy and whether those policies are being followed or engaged with properly. And the complaints review is a different section. I believe that's under DD 40. So again, I'm going to have to ask you, and you know, if we can get that body cam footage so that we can engage in our review of policy execution.
Yeah, I hear what you're saying, Chair Depper, but let me talk about video evidence a little bit. In police use of force cases, use of force that is a violent act, it's not easy to always watch, especially depending on the level of force that's employed. As a practitioner professional, you never watch a video until you've had the opportunity to read the officer's use of force report. And that's grounded in the fact, it's grounded in law in the Graham standard. An officer applies force given the totality of the circumstances. We have the Graham Plus standard in this state where the force needs to not only be objectively reasonable, but proportional and necessary. To watch a video and to start making conclusions without any other context, I think is extraordinarily reckless. And I am very, very passionate about the process by which we review these complaints and then provide you the full context, and then you have full access to the videos. So you have all of the evidence to contemplate. But it does take a number of days to get that, you know, assembled and presented to you.
Well, and I understand that, and I appreciate that perspective, Chief, but again, conflating the complaints process with the Commission's Section 184 authority pursuant to Resolution 709 to engage in audit and review of policies and how they are executed. So we may just have a difference of opinion on that, but in such a circumstance, and I've been an attorney for almost 20 years, I've engaged with law enforcement all over the country. I'm familiar with the totality of the circumstances test, right? And so our audit authority is much different from a complaint authority or a disciplinary authority. It is policy oriented. It is directive oriented. It is whether or not the structure of the department and the policies that innervate it are being executed in a way that is consistent. It's not to punish anybody. It's to see if our policies that have been put forth by the department, when engaging with this commission, engaging with the council, are being followed, and if those policies need to be modified at all. And so that's why we're asking for this body cam footage. And so I'm going to continue, and I'll just leave it, in court frequently we say, well, I'll just leave this question open because it will continue to be a question of mine. And I'm going to continue to request that body cam footage under our inherent authority, separate from the complaint authority.
I understood. I understand what you're, asking of me. I still don't know if you're looking for policy compliance related to the use of force. I don't know how you can draw a conclusion without the use of force report from the officer to articulate the facts and circumstances that led them to make that decision.
Well, and I appreciate that, Chief. The problem that I have with that, or the objection I have with that, is that in its delegation of authority, the council did not articulate that as an exception to our request for review. If they had, I would totally agree with you. Then, yeah, we need that use of force report first. I didn't sit on the council at the time. Don't sit on it now. They didn't ask me about how they should structure that, but they gave us what they gave us. And so without that exception, we have this very broad authority just by the letter of the charter and the resolutions. And so that's the basis upon which we're asking. And I'll let you off the hook at this point because I know you're not going to hand it to me now. But that is the perspective that I have right now, and I'm going to continue to push on that perspective. So I will yield the floor if any other commissioners have questions.
I just have a comment as relates to this direct issue, Chief Burke. If we wanted to generally review body cam footage, not about use of force potentially related to a claim, but to the fair and impartial policing policy, that would be separate, right? So that's another reason I think, Chair Depper, that we would want to review that. That's in a separate purview.
Absolutely.
Just as an aside.
Understood.
I trust that you are completely sincere when you say that you believe more or worse violence could have occurred at that incident if, local police were not there. I want you to know that I completely believe that. But I want to deal with the facts that we have right now, because we can't go back in time and see what would have happened if you weren't there, right? What we do know is true is that harm was done to the public by local police officers, including at least one BPD officer, right? So my line of questioning is just in an attempt to kind of suss out how we can have a better outcome next time this happens. You proactively met with the mayor and city department heads about how to tackle this issue when it inevitably arose, and you also reached out to other local agencies to see how you could support this response if needed. Did you reach out to Migrant Justice, Vermont Asylum Assistance Project, ACLU Vermont, or any other community organizations during that time?
No.
Would you be willing to?
Certainly.
Do you think that would be a good idea?
In light of what has transpired, yes.
Okay. When we spoke about this general issue last in January, you described that police officers in Vermont have a duty to intervene when they witness excessive use in force, but that this only applies to Vermont officers, not federal agents. Is that right? Because they have a different standard?
Because it relies on the statutory definition of a Vermont law enforcement officer, I do in fact think that's true. And I think I also discussed the difference between the federal standard for federal agents, and we have the enhanced standard here in Vermont, in that oftentimes what could be perceived as potentially excessive use of force could be the difference between the standard by which Vermont is held as opposed to the standard by which federal agents are held.
Okay. So how are BPD officers trained to intervene if they see a federal agent choking someone?
It would be the same as if they
Is that
were
excessive?
to actually strangle someone. I mean, it's a nuance, but you choke on food, you're strangled by a person.
Holding someone up by their throat, applying force? I'm sorry, I don't know what the precise definition would be of that, but if a BPD officer saw a federal officer do that, what would they be trained to do? Do they have a duty to intervene?
It would be the preference to intervene.
Okay, how about if they saw somebody being kicked while they were prone on the ground? Do they have a duty to intervene?
So it's a bit of a loaded question in the sense that laying on the ground, are they accessing weapons? What do we know about their behavior leading up to? Again, this is,
What if there are multiple officers on somebody prone on the ground?
that does not sound like a lawful application of force to me, but again, without any further detail, I feel.
It's a general thought experiment. It's not a precise instance that I'm referring to.
Yeah, and in my role, I also have to be cautious about loaded questions.
Okay. Were BPD officers directed to look out for this kind of violent behavior that I think we've all seen federal ICE officers use throughout the country when they were at this incident on Dorset Street?
We operate under the statewide use of force policy, which outlines these duties.
But they weren't directed to look out and see if this behavior was taking place.
No, but we do so through policy compliance and day-to-day operations.
They were actively looking for this behavior in protectors that were there that day, though, right?
So I think the question is, why were their backs to one group as opposed to another group?
Maybe
And
not
what
why
can-
were their backs to, but if they were there to protect them, it seems like there's kind of a double standard. If they saw someone from the public who was there choking somebody, whether it was a random public citizen or an ICE officer, they would feel like this is assaultive behavior, I need to intervene. And if they were directed to specifically look at federal agents exhibiting that behavior, because we know that that is behavior that they have taken part in, that they would be not with their backs to that activity.
Understand the questioning, the line of question here, but there are also like limitations to what officers can perceive in 360 in the moment, given the number that was there. I will say that, once you have the opportunity to view all the body cam footage, you'll see that our officers stood in a group for quite a period of time on Dorset Street before any of these events unfolded. And in fact, weren't anywhere near the house where the federal agents were operating. But at times, once the officers were tasked with assisting the federal agents from getting the vehicles from the scene, there were certainly instances where their backs were to the federal agents and the vehicles. There were certainly instances where they were strewn out, even as a team, and unable to see even their colleagues and what they were facing. It was a very dynamic scene.
Okay. Local police, per the timeline that you gave, kind of finished up after the federal agents did. They went back to where their vehicles were staged, and they left. The protectors that were there kind of picked up the pieces as traffic was opened again. They provided first aid to people that were still there. They checked inside the house to see if anybody was left, if anybody needed help, if they were okay. Do you see local police as having a responsibility in any of those situations?
So I know, in fact, that our officers did attempt to check on a number of the demonstrators that were there and potentially suffering from injuries. In large number, there were medics from the activist community, which is common, and our officers were told that, you know, they were all set and didn't need further help from us. We did not have an assignment related to the residents. Anytime that the Burlington Police executes a search warrant on any type of real property, we always make sure that the residence is clear, safe, and secure before leaving that scene. But again, the federal agency ERO was responsible, in my mind, for that work. In terms of who actually had authority and when Dorset Street was open, that is under the purview of the South Burlington Police Department. And I know through public comment that, you know, that's been somehow attributed to the Burlington Police Department, that we opened the road. We never closed the road. We never had a traffic assignment.
Okay. Do you think that people may have responded differently if an officer had brought that med kit out from the car before they asked people if they needed help? Do you think
I don't
that
think a member of the public would be able to recognize the black backpack for what it is.
Okay. If your limitations preclude you from definitively determining if an ICE duty is in fact lawful, it seems like you err on the side of caution and assume that it is as a self-protective measure. And I'm wondering why you don't err on the side of caution for the folks who are at risk of being kidnapped and assume that it's not, which may be along the lines of what Chair Depper was asking about doing more due diligence now that we cannot really rely on the good faith of these officers.
I think that's a reasonable statement, and you know, the tough place that we're put in is that there is a matter of law in these operations, but given what we now know about this operation, I have a lot of open questions about what we can rely on and how we can verify. And I think that our review of this incident, along with the reviews that will be conducted, after action reviews that will be conducted by the Vermont State Police, will help really give us an evidence-based way to approach any future operations. But again, you know, I know it's a little contentious. We just need a little time in order to do that review and to reflect upon the incident itself, and then in earnest, think about a better path forward.
Okay. Well, thank you for answering my questions. I just have a couple statements as well that are just my opinion. I think that if BPD is responding to an incident, either in Burlington or another jurisdiction via mutual aid, you need to be prepared to share the responsibility of the other officers. When it's dark and chaotic, people see, you know, officers with helmets and weapons. They're not looking at the badges. And if something goes wrong, their trust in BPD is lost, just the same. People that were left in the street when traffic was opened up after they saw you leave didn't say, oh, that's South Burlington's responsibility, that's VSP's responsibility, that's ERO that did that. You know, if you choose to respond to that, I think that, you know, as you've accepted, there's going to be a responsibility shared all around. The second thing is, I think that unless BPD revises its training about their duty to intervene to include federal agents when they're tasked with crowd support at activities like we saw on March 11th, then they should just stay home. I say this because if there's not some evidence to show change on this front, then the public is only going to be more wary when you show up next time. They're going to be more on edge, which I believe, in all sincerity, will lead to more violence. Thanks.
Thank you, Commissioner. Are there any other questions or comments by the commissioners? Yes, Commissioner Finneran.
Thanks. Just a couple of questions, Chief. I know that it hasn't been that long. It's been less than 2 weeks, maybe 2 weeks. Obviously, policies or directives haven't changed. Is there anything in this moment that you feel comfortable saying that you wish had gone differently? And sorry, specifically on behalf of, in terms of actions of BPD officers?
In terms of BPD, not at this stage, because I too rely on a fulsome review, because I ultimately will have to make decisions potentially, and I try very, very hard to not bias myself in any way and wait for an entire investigative package to reach my office.
Understood. I know you were at City Council last night and you had an opportunity to hear from members of the public, and I'm curious what your takeaways were.
Yeah, I'm certainly not surprised by the outrage, not surprised by an erosion of trust in the BPD by the public, and disappointment as day by day we learn more and more about the incompetency of ICE ERO. But I also feel as though that this is a time where we can come together, answer these questions, and have a better strategy moving forward, noting that this is extraordinarily difficult with federal operations that randomly show up that you have to contend with. And, you know, I have been critical of the initial incident and the investigative tactics used by ERO in this botched car stop that led to a poorly executed perimeter and just a rabid infatuation with obtaining a warrant, getting in that home to arrest a person that was likely never there. And I do have to, you know, reflect upon how can we stay on the right side of the law but deal with this in a constructive, legal, and safe manner moving forward.
Thank you. And just one last question. Are there steps that the department might take to ensure is the wrong word, but to in hopes that incidents like this, which will probably continue to happen, don't further erode trust between BPD and immigrant communities?
Certainly, I think, you know, the first step would be if another one of these incidents were to happen in the near future, would be having a very active and difficult role with the federal agents to ensure that they are, in fact, competently executing their lawful authority and taking the steps to verify their actions. I mean, a beauty of this state is I can actually call the acting United States attorney and ask them if they're engaged, if there are concerns with the weight of evidence, the validity of evidence, and then in turn really press colleagues on what are we doing. And I think from the onset that there is much more effective and efficient ways that enhance public safety in which ERO could be leveraging when identifying targets of their investigation and then developing operational plans to subsequently arrest them.
Yes, Commissioner Paul?
Yeah, okay. Thank you. So I have a couple of questions. You had said last night at the council meeting, and you again said today, that you hope to have your administrative investigation, right, completed within 30 days. Now, I'm probably being a little bit particular, but just because I know that there are going to be members of the public who are going to wonder, and I actually wonder, when you say within 30 days, do you mean 30 days from today, or do you mean 30 days from when the incident happened?
30 days from the incident.
Okay, so that would mean sometime between the, whatever, 10th and 15th of April.
That's our goal.
Okay, all right. The other question I have is you had said there were 121 complaints that have been filed. Now, sometimes, you know, we've sat here and you have said that, and I've heard this over many years, that sometimes complaints are not complaints. They're statements, or that are not necessarily, don't rise to the level of a complaint. Are most of the 121, in your opinion, complaints?
The 121 are in fact complaints, and I received a large number of other emails that I would consider, you know, feedback and not complaints about officer performance or directive compliance.
Okay. The other thing I wanted to ask you about was, I think it was last week, the South Burlington chief appeared before the South Burlington City Council and gave a very, very complete and factual, in his opinion, account of what had happened on the 11th. And he had said that when he went to speak with the ICE agent or official or whomever, whatever their title is, who was in charge that day, that that official said that they were going to serve the warrant at whatever means necessary. Did you or anyone at BPD hear that? Or did you, because that's what he had said, which is a pretty strong statement. We're gonna serve this warrant at whatever means necessary.
I did not hear that directly, but I know Deputy Chief Labarge was in the command post, and I know that other statements were made by a supervisory agent with ERO, words to the effect of, it is what it is, we're not going to deviate, I've got Washington on the phone. I mean, cavalier type behavior.
A number of people have sort of asked this, so I don't want you to have to repeat anything. I think, as a few people have said, we can't go backwards. We can only go forward. And it sounds to me like you have, I'm sure, given a great deal of thought to future plans. As Commissioner Genorio said, and we all were aware, you had met with the mayor and other officials, fire chief, others, to talk about what the response was going to be. That was back in January, and you did that in advance of something happening, and here we are. So, as you say, we learn, we grow, we do better next time, because there probably will be a next time. Do you have plans, or is there plans from the administration to convene, municipal, county meetings? Is this already going on? It sounds to me, but certainly you can correct me if I'm wrong, that the concerns that have been well stated by Chair Depper and Commissioner Genorio, will those all be taken fully into account?
Certainly, we're actively receiving this information now, a volume of information last night at City Council. Again, I would consider this a large body of information to take back and reflect upon. Thinking about the preparatory steps that we took, and a lot of, for lack of a better term, informal tabletop exercises that we had with our mutual aid partners. What we really couldn't calculate is what would the interface with ICE ERO look like. And we know now that they are not a terrific mutual aid partner whatsoever. They're, let's get our job done at all means possible. And I think it's going to take quite a bit of thought and probably some legal consultation to figure out what we can exactly leverage in the moment to ensure that they are in fact following their directives, following federal law, and then carefully really balancing, is there an articulable public safety risk here that we need to be involved in? And a thing that came up last night at City Council that was pretty illuminating is that on Monday, March 9th, there was a similar call to action that went out. Allegedly, there was federal agents on Pine Street surveilling an apartment building, and a call to action went out. I was made aware of this. I drove down through the area to see what was going on there, and I did see folks assembled on the sidewalk that were clearly on the lookout for something. I didn't see any vehicles that were apparently occupied by federal agents in my assessment. Independent to my assessment, the police lieutenant that was acting as the watch commander today also went through that area and made an assessment, and we left that scene alone because there was no public safety risk. So different than the situation that Chief Breaux was faced with in the city of South Burlington, but again, an example of how these things could play out. And we will, take our responsibility seriously when making the determination on whether or not there is a sufficient public safety risk that we need to have BPD present for.
Thank you. I just have a couple of other comments. Thanks for answering my questions. just wanted to thank you, Chief, for your robust review of the events of March 11th that involved a good number of uniformed members of the Burlington Police Force. It's very helpful, and I've now heard the presentation tonight and last night, but it was very helpful to have an accurate account and also a thoughtful account, in your opinion, of the events that took place that day after what I believe must be an initial review of the events. I'd also like to add that I hear your words of reflection on the day, and I find them to be both insightful and meaningful. I agree with you that we must not let the day, the events of the day, sow dissension, because it's very easy to do that. But that as a community, I feel we should and must come forward with ways to lean into one another and find respectful and thoughtful ways to engage. I'm hopeful that the meeting that has been called by the City Council for March 30th, or maybe it's 31st, that will involve other partners will be a first step in that regard. And I also want to acknowledge that I find that your response to Commissioner Genorio to be both refreshing and indicative of a chief who wants to do their very best and will talk with, engage with, and collaborate with groups who represent some of our most vulnerable in our community. Your admission that in the eyes of many of our community, particularly those who were at the event as the day unfolded, that the actions have eroded the trust and goodwill that the department and many in our community have worked very hard to establish and see flourish. And in my eyes, your admission is not only thoughtful, it's highly deserving of our respect and presence, and is a first step toward repair. These are not easy words to say, Chief, and I want to thank you for saying them. They're, in my own opinion, yet another reason why our community is lucky to have you leading our force at this time. Certainly, there is no question that we must hold everyone accountable. And of course, as we all know, being a police officer carries with it an enormous responsibility, protecting and serving, often under the most challenging of circumstances. The reality is that we all must do better. And I look forward to those efforts, because if we don't, then ICE wins.
Thank you, Commissioner Paul. I just want to have one reflection, and I understand our professional obligation and duty to reflect upon this and think about better ways, right, to move forward. But I think it's imperative to also ask the same of the community that wishes to either peacefully demonstrate, which I saw plenty of, or engage in civil disobedience, which is fine. But we also need, as a community, to understand that violence against local police is not okay. That's not going to help anyone move forward. And the fact that we're willing to stand in that space and prevent local activists from physically engaging with federal ICE agents has to be highlighted. That is a very difficult line to hold, but also a critical line to hold. And we saw an escalation when the ICE ERO agents went to retrieve the last car from Dorset Street. When there was no BPD there, there might have been a couple of state troopers left over, state troopers who I saw be subject to incendiary gas munitions used by federal agents indiscriminately. And that type of escalation is of grave concern. So my ask to the activist community is, please don't perpetrate violence on us to get to even a more violent conflict potentially with federal agents in our community.
I would just add, thank you, Chief. that I wholeheartedly agree. The reality is, and as I had said, we all have to do better. Because in the end, we are one community. I think the more conversation that there is, the better. And certainly having the ability to bring those voices who often are not at the table to that table, I hope will be a strong first step or a strong step in that direction. So thank you very much, and thank you for those words. Thank you.
Thank you, Commissioner Paul. Thank you very much, Chief. Appreciate your time. Appreciate your answers today. I believe that concludes the,
I do actually have one other question.
Go ahead.
Unrelated to that. The past 2 months, we've gotten the annual data for incidents and arrests. I know y'all have been real busy. Do you know if Jeff Nicholson is going to get us that use of force data this month or the next month?
So Jeff has the traffic stop data prepared.
stop.
And I asked him, given the volume of material on the agenda tonight, I said, let's table this. And we are hopeful to bring back traffic stop data and use of force data for April.
Okay.
And depending on, maybe the chair can help us work on this in terms of setting the agenda, it might be wise to do traffic stop data 1 month and use of force data the next.
Okay, thank you. Is it possible for you to just email us and CC Jeff so that we can get the data as well instead of just the PDF presentation?
Let me talk to Jeff
To
and see
get
what.
in contact? Thank you.
Yeah, what the format is, certainly.
thank you for that flag, Commissioner Janorio. Again, thank you, Chief.
Can I just ask one more
Yeah,
question?
Commissioner Finner.
In terms of mutual aid, I understand how BPD might be asked to assist ICE in any number of things. Is there ever a situation in which you guys would ask ICE to help you?
ICE, ERO, no. So examples of federal partnerships that we regularly engage in, like we have a police detective that's assigned to the Drug Enforcement Administration. We might confer with the FBI on a complex criminal investigation or, a threat against national security. Secret Service, when dignitaries come to town, those are more the standard ones. The Department of Homeland Security, they're criminal investigators that are assigned to internet crimes against children. We have interface with them through our relationship with the Chittenden Unit for Special Investigations. But ICE itself and ERO specifically, because of their mission set, no.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, thank you, Chief. Any other questions, comments from the commissioners? No, hearing none. Thank you very much, Chief. I appreciate your time. Okay, moving on into commission business, unless anyone needs a break? No? Okay. Moving on into commission business, we have committee reports from all committees. The Complaints Committee is first, and I believe, do we have that scheduled for next month, Commissioner Janorio?
We had a potential scheduling. Chief Burke responded to our email just before our meeting, sort of making a recommendation about how the Complaints Committee has been done in the past. More that the commissioners would meet on our own whenever we have availability. And then when we specifically need BPD there to give us an update or review, that we would schedule that at the same time as our regular meet, before or after in an executive session, which I think would be useful. And then my only question, legally how that works is, are members of the Complaints Committee able to meet together to suss out those complaints if it's not necessarily to what those complaints involved, but say updating the spreadsheet and downloading files and putting them on the SharePoint? Do we need to warn a meeting for that, or are we able to just like meet on Zoom and do that without needing that because we're not a quorum?
If it's purely administrative, we can do it without warning anything.
Okay.
We can just meet on Zoom. If we're making determinations, and this is a question we can refer to the city attorney's office unless somebody knows here, because it's a committee of 3 and not a quorum. I have the same question as to whether or not we can just do it without warning it altogether, and I
Yeah.
don't know the answer to that.
Okay. I think that would be helpful from an administrative standpoint to get those 181, et cetera, logged, regardless of the next time we have a complaints committee meeting.
Sure, I appreciate that. And I've been trying to, I was having difficulty with the city email system. I've been trying to set up an auto forward to all the commissioners for all the complaints that come in, unsuccessfully so far, sadly. Yeah, I'm working on that, a better process for that, so thank you.
May I ask a question?
Yes, Commissioner Cox.
So it was my understanding that you guys were going to alert us to any that a decision needed to be made on. Are we supposed to be reading every complaint and every action taken on the complaint?
I mean, you don't
Everybody.
necessarily have to. My understanding was that everybody wanted access to those complaints. We could talk about it as a commission, certainly as we move forward with this process. I mean, from the administrative standpoint, I don't hear you saying you want, knowledge of all the administrative stuff, but, certainly if, I would think
So you
that
missed your, I think perhaps you're misunderstanding me. What I'm saying is that we have 14 days from the time that the chief takes final action on a complaint to either accept, reject, or ask for more information. So our attention needs to be drawn to those where the chief has taken a final action so that within the 14 days that we can determine whether we accept, we reject, or we would like more information. Now, if we ask for more information, we get 14 days from the time that the additional information is given to us, such as body cam footage or, whatever else that we're asking for, like a dispatch audio or whatever it is that we think that we need in order to make a determination as to whether or not we accept or reject. But because of the time limitation, it's been the procedure of the commission in past years that if there were any that a final action, final decision by the chief has been made, that the members of the commission are alerted so that they can read the materials. And so that's why having the materials in folders or we can go and look at them is really important. But have we actually even had any
I have not seen any
decisions?
notices of final action on any complaints. So I would argue that 14 days wouldn't run until we actually have notice. So, that is not from the complaints that I have seen that we have reviewed or are going to review, I don't think that time is running. And if it comes up, I would say that it would be on a case-by-case basis. If it comes up, we can deal with that then. But then that would be a evaluation of if and when we receive notice for that time to run.
I think
Okay,
what
so you're going to let us know if you receive that.
If I receive any notice of final action, but I have not so far.
I
Okay,
think what we had said at one point, several meetings ago, was we had asked DC LaBarge to CC everyone on the commission when he sent out a complaint and further information, and that way everybody had access to it exactly at the same time, and then only members of the subcommittee would be responsible for making sure that we respond, such that if there was a strict time constraint, we made sure that we asked for that extra information, et cetera. I don't think that was clearly relayed to him, but that would be my preference if we could instate that as soon as possible.
So, Chair Depper, excuse me, but I believe that the commission has to vote as a whole to request more information. So I don't think I've delegated that to the subcommittee. I believe that this has to go to the commission as a whole to either accept, reject, or request further information.
Do we need a subcommittee?
I guess I'm confused what the point of the subcommittee is then.
I think these are, I mean, I think they're fair questions. I do think it's a little bit academic right now, since we don't have a notice that is of final action that we're worried about. And I hear these concerns. I think they're valid concerns. But in the position we're at right now, where we're, trying to get a meeting scheduled and the administration squared away, I think it might be putting the cart a little bit before the horse, in trying to figure out those types of issues if they're not active issues right now.
I think the active issue is the administrative part, and if we don't need to do that administrative part because complaints is just in the general purview of the commission, and we just determine amongst ourselves, Commissioner Depper is looking at these complaints, I'm looking at these 3 complaints, and we just trust each other to report back in some amount of time, but everybody has access to it, then I feel like that does eliminate some horses before the carts.
I mean, I think that would eliminate the need for the complaints committee, but I think at this point, as we sit here, we do have a complaints committee. And, I mean, unless someone has a motion to dissolve it right now, I would encourage us to just go forward with the complaints committee as it's currently, constituted, and as we're moving forward in that, to just get to a point where we're organized and having a meeting so that, because I feel like if we were to just say, well, let's dissolve it right now, then we just go back to square one, and we lack more organization that we were kind of moving forward to. So it may be very well that in 2 months we dissolve the complaints committee and we find a better way to do it. But I would suggest that right now we just continue on the path we're on, just to try to get some organization to it, so that we can make these, make these types of decisions. Okay, all right, thank you. Animal Control Committee, Commissioner Janorio, in continuing your yeoman's work with regard to committees, how is that going?
It's fine, thank you. Michaela, did you want to give an update on that? I think you have it.
I can give an update. There's not much to update. We have a meeting scheduled for Wednesday, the 1st, in, I believe, what is it called? Queen City Room upstairs. I will distribute an agenda by the end of this week. I think those are the updates.
Okay. And I apologize, I didn't mean to leave you out, Commissioner Finneran.
All good.
Okay, very well, thank you. Is there any discussion or comments? Yes, Commissioner Cox.
I just wanted to verify that we're going to be getting a packet from Haley.
From Haley?
Yeah, for the Animal Control Committee.
Okay, I do not know the answer to that. I mean,
I think when we get the agenda done and we give that to Shive, then she puts the whole packet together with the information that they have. And maybe we can ask Haley to give her brief overview again when everybody is there in the beginning about our exact role.
thank you, Commissioner Cox and Commissioner Janorio, and thank you as well, Commissioner Finneran, for your work in that on that committee. Moving on to the bylaws discussion. And so first, I want to go back and reference the minutes from the last meeting, just for kind of just level setting and make sure we're all kind of on the same page as to at least where we are on that piece, at least where we're starting from. Pull that down real quick. And so the minutes from the last meeting in section 5.3 indicates commissioners decide to limit to an hour to discussion the bylaws changes. Chair versus co-chair or vice chair were discussed. Those were ultimately voted on as a dual system where you have a chair, vice chair, or a co-chair system, depending on how the commission wanted to vote at the time that I believe at the time that the chair or co-chairs were selected. And that was voted on and unanimously approved. Then the modification to public comment was discussed at some length. We unanimously accepted a 4-minute time limit for public comment. Let's see. There was discussion on, and I can't tell from the minutes, but there was discussion on some of what Commissioner Paul brought up of some content restriction on the speech. I voiced some concerns about content restriction that was, beyond, I voiced concern on what it says in the minutes, policing the speech of individuals, but I still have that concern as a First Amendment matter. And that's where we were. Now for today, as I understood Commissioner Paul's request, I had put into the documents associated with our agenda both the bylaw edits of Commissioner Paul from late January, the bylaw edits of Commissioner Genorio for late January, a unified document that contained both those markups as well as Commissioner Cox's comments with regard to the bylaws. And in the interim, I developed a bylaws, it's labeled as BPC Bylaws Clean 3, or BPC Bylaws Clean 32326. My intent with that was for ease for the commissioners, and kind of developed a more plain language version of the bylaws and incorporating both what we had voted on and some of the red lines that were provided, and provided those to the commissioners as well. So I'll open up the floor for comment or for further discussion on anything that the commissioners think needs to be further amended or updated with the bylaws. Yes, go ahead, Commissioner Paul.
Thank you. So I think my understanding of what we were going to be doing was that those things that we had already voted on were going to be put into one document because we had already agreed to them. There are a number of things that we have not agreed to that have been taken out of the bylaws Clean 32326.
Okay.
For example, item 2.2, there was a specific reason why the language that was in the red line version that I had presented was there, and that is because those were things that were mentioned at the retreat. There was a list of what we effectively had put into as guiding principles. I think they are important, and while they may be wordy, I don't think that that means that they shouldn't be included. Coming to meetings prepared, having reviewed materials ahead of time, be mindful of time and consideration for others is a synopsis of what I had put onto the red line version, and they weren't my words. They were words that came as a result of the work that we had all done together back in November. So while I appreciate the efficiency, and perhaps an argument could certainly be made that bylaws should use efficient language, I do think that we should at least pause and appreciate where these words came from, because actually they were the words of the people that are sitting at this table. So, and I think they were good, and that's why I tried to incorporate them. So I appreciate the work that was done to try to make this shorter, but I do think that there are times where it's okay that they not be short.
Sure, and I can appreciate that. I think at least in the clean one that I developed, I understand your interest in developing that thought a little more. Part of my thinking with that was that twofold. One, I do think there is value in brevity, in particular in these documents, certainly. But two, it occurs to me that, this is a document that, at least theoretically, should be accessible to all the people in our community. And not all the people in our community, I've worked with in many levels of, with many, many different types of people, many different education standards for people over the years. And it is simply a fact that, there are going to be people in our community, voting citizens, that don't know what fidelity is, that don't know what efficiency is, and, that don't have a, sophisticated level of reading comprehension. And so, while I completely, appreciate and I don't disagree with the concept of incorporating, as many ideas as we can to, these types of things of, coming prepared for open, engaged conversation, honoring fidelity and efficiency to the agenda, great. But I am concerned that if we are to be a commission for the public and accessible to the public, that, brevity and clarity, and, simple language is an appropriate value to that. Now, I recognize that others may disagree, but that was at least the thought process that came through. If y'all disagree, if you would prefer to have the entire language of Commissioner Paul's 2.2 involved in that, fine, doesn't matter. I mean, it's not that huge an issue, but I do think there is value there in that type of brevity. Yes, Commissioner Cox.
So my concern is that I wasn't really able to fully read Commissioner Powell's red line version and compare it to your version. And so I'm a little bit at a loss because there just wasn't time. It was all sent today. And I had other things I was working on today. And so can we just table this until next month and everybody look at it and then maybe perhaps email you a specific, I really support, virtually all of what Commissioner Paul had said. And it does seem like your latest iteration, Commissioner Depper, Chair Depper, is closer to what Commissioner Paul's version was, but it's missing some points. And then it's also, as I mentioned to you in an email, you mentioned like our responsibilities for complaints, but you don't mention the deadlines, and the deadlines are really, I think, pretty critical. So, and it's an important part of what we do.
So I understand that, are you making a motion to table it till the next meeting?
Yes, thank you.
Okay. Is there a second?
Second.
Okay. All those in favor, please say aye.
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 None opposed? Motion passes. We will move on. Get back to my agenda real quick. I got too many things up. All right, we don't have any commendations this month. The next meeting will be 4/21 of 2026, April 21st of 2026. We have we modified and dispensed with the executive session today. So that concludes our business. So I will move to adjourn. Do I hear a second?
Second.
All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Meeting is adjourned. Thank you.